It's almost like God instituted it. He did. So we are in Genesis. We're going to be starting at Genesis 26, verse 34, and we're going to work our way through 27. Today's sort of a special teaching to me because it's about trying to be a Christian, a godly person in a very fallen world. Today's story is about godly people placed in an ungodly situation, surrounded by ungodly, worldly people, and it gets very, very messy. It gets really hairy, a little questionable, and yet even through all the Isaacs and Esau's in today's story, and in our context, through divorces and bad investments and rebellious kids, God's grace rests on his people, even and especially in messed up situations. And so I really hope today is balm for the weary soul, encouragement. But before we get into this messy situation, it would help to understand the people in it. So this is a hair bit of recap. First, we have a loving couple in Isaac and Rebekah. Rebekah is a tremendous woman of faith. The Bible has told us so far that she's kind to strangers, she's generous with her time, she's quick to be part of the covenant at the end of Genesis 24, she's a woman of prayer, she's a loving mother, she's a comforting wife. The Bible has described a woman of immense righteousness. We also have Isaac, Rebekah's husband, who up until this point has been a wonderfully godly man. However, he has a weak point in his armor. He loved his wicked son Esau and the love of food. And believe me, it's okay to love your children and it's okay to love food, but it's not okay to love them more than God. And it seems God made Isaac so prosperous that his love of luxury and exotic foods has overtaken his zeal for the covenant. And you know what? He needs breaking. And this is a powerful story for us who live in a consumer culture, that we can fall so in love with the comforts God has provided that we stop loving God. How many people don't want to get out of bed on Sunday mornings? Yet the bed is a gift from God. The air conditioning is a gift from God. The roof is a gift from God. We could fall so in love with the gift that we forget the gift giver, and that was Isaac at this season of life. And it's a warning that we must not forget where all of this comes from. You know, I've been watching all these people in Wuhan. They're barricaded in their houses. They're running out of food. They have no medicine. Believe me, it could all be taken away like this. And all those comforts disappear. And what do you have left? Your NFL Sunday ticket? It's useless. He's forgotten where it all has come from. Now, we have Isaac and Rebekah. Now, Isaac and Rebekah had two sons. The younger was chosen by God to lead. Jacob was called a tam son. That's a Hebrew word meaning perfect. He was called a perfect son who managed the family's household, who walked in righteousness, who was the promised future leader by God. When God says, this is the one, he's the one. Now, our last character of today's story is the older wicked brother who, and this brings us to the beginning of today's story, Genesis 26:34. When Esau was 40 years old, he took as wives Judith, the daughter of Beri, the Hittite, and Bathshemath, the daughter of Elon, the Hittite. And they were a grief of mind to Isaac and Rebekah. Which that's a whole sermon dealing with difficult in-laws and all that sort of stuff. But we have Esau, who constantly neglects his duties, who is out playing all day, who Hebrews 12 has defined as sexually immoral and evil, who sold his birthright for a single bowl of stew, is how it puts it. And now he has married two pagan Hittite women. And note, he didn't just sin by marrying two wives, which was against all of the patriarchs. He also sinned by marrying pagan wives. So he married the wrong woman twice at the same time. And they were so difficult that they brought great grief to his parents. And so Esau, by every account, has disqualified himself from a leadership position. And Jacob, on every account, has qualified himself as, qualified it that he is the one to lead. Not to mention, God has chosen Jacob, not Esau. Not to mention, Esau already sold his birthright. So that's the framework. That's the context. Now, with that, let's get into the messiness of today's text, and hopefully we can see it with a level of clarity. So Genesis 28, verse 1, or 27, what's next? 27. I'm glad you're in charge. I need more coffee. My kid was up at 5-something this morning. I'm still dead. Now it came to pass, when Isaac was old and his eyes were so dim that he could not see. That is a physical description. That also seems to be a spiritual one. That he called Esau his older son and said to him, "My son." And he answered him, "Here I am." Then he said, "Behold, now I am old. I do not know the day of my death." Every patriarch up until this point, God has enlightened them that when their time was coming. He's the first one to not know. And so he seems to be in a very real spiritual rut, which, might I add, comfortability provides wondrously. "Now therefore, please take your weapons, your quiver, and your bow, and go out into the field and hunt game for me, and make me savory food such as I love, and bring it to me that I may eat, that my soul may bless you before I die." Question: who requires animal sacrifices so that it may please him, so that he may give a covenantal blessing? God. Isaac is taking on the role of God. He's asking his son to make an animal sacrifice to him so that he may give him a covenantal blessing. And this is very, very wicked. This is very wrong. And furthermore, he's directly going against God's design. The blessing was for who? Jacob. God told Rebekah that Esau will serve the younger brother, yet Isaac chooses his own way. I want you to notice how much self-possession he had in his little statement there. And so he chooses his own way, not God's way. He's taking on God's role, so much so he even wants the animal sacrifice. This is no less than an absolute rebellion against God. Now I want you to think about Rebekah. She loves her husband. She wants to listen to her husband. She wants him to lead. And what a horrible position she just put him in. Verse 5. "Now, Rebekah was listening when Isaac spoke to Esau his son. And Esau went into the field to hunt game and bring it." And can you imagine Isaac wakes up that morning, and listen, I'm going to acknowledge something about us men. When we get sick, we can kind of be babies. And so he wakes up, "I think today's the day, sweetheart." "No, it's not. Clear your lungs." Oh. So he goes, "I need to give the blessing." And she goes, "Oh, good. Finally we can get this going." And he calls the wrong son. Yes, she's listening to the other side of that tent to figure out what he's going to say to the wrong son. And she hears that her husband is putting his soul, her sons, the whole community in jeopardy because of this rebellion. He's choosing his preferences over God's commands. And boy, if that isn't the fall of every believer, if that isn't the fall of every denomination, if that isn't the fall of every godly household. My way, God. I know what you say, but this is going to be best. Verse 6, "So Rebekah spoke to Jacob her son, saying, Indeed, I heard your father speak to Esau, your brother, saying, Brave me game, and make savory food for me, that I may eat it, and bless you in the presence of the Lord before my death. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice according to all what I command you." Do you see it? Do you see the horrible position this godly woman's in? Now, I'm a student of church history. I love church history. I love it so very much. I read it for fun. But The Western church, now the rabbis typically get this right, but the Western church has typically gotten this wrong. And what they say is that Rebekah and Jacob, what they're about to do is a grievous sin. And before we do, I want to take the stance Luther sort of did. He always appealed to evident reasoning. So I want to use some reasoning here as an example, a little bit of a modern context. It's 1945. You're in Berlin, Germany, and you're hiding a family of Jews in your attic. You're hiding a mother, a wife, 2 kids, and a baby boy. And the Nazis bang on your door. There's a tambourine in there. That's amazing. My ADD kicked in so bad. They bang on the door. Bang, 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 bang. There we go. They say, "Are there Jews hiding in your house?" Now you have to ask yourself, what do? Should you be known as a liar? Or should you give up innocent life? This is an honest question. You lie through your teeth, because it is infinitely better to be known as a liar than it would be to let that family get destroyed in a brutal way. Would we say in that context it was more righteous to lie than it was to tell the truth? Absolutely. Life is messy, isn't it? It's really messy. And God knows that. The entirety of Scripture is filled with messy situations. Think of the Egyptian maidservants. Remember Pharaoh said when the baby boys start to come out, to kill them. And what did they say? We can't do that, because they feared God. So they were like, Pharaoh, I don't know what we're standing there with catcher's mitts. These things are flying out so fast. And they lied bold-faced to Pharaoh. And it was counted as righteousness. Liars. Moses' mother deceived Pharaoh's daughter, Rahab in Joshua 2, Jael in Judges 4 and 5. Even Abraham and Isaac lied and said that their wives were their sisters so that they wouldn't be killed and their wives taken. They did it for their wives and themselves. Luther, reflecting on these things, called it obliging, because it not only serves to the advantage of someone else who would otherwise suffer harm or violence, but also prevents a sin. Therefore, it is not proper to call it a lie, for it is rather a virtue, an outstanding prudence, or Paul might say a zeal for piety. Life is messy. If you don't have that in your notes, write it, because I'm going to say it 100 more times. As a believer, listen, I think about it in this context. As a believer, I'm called to be gentle. We're called to be gentle. What if a bad man comes into your house to do bad things? You better believe you meet them with a shotgun. You better believe it, because we have to protect our families. How about the Sabbath? Jesus went through this. I'm going through the Exodus right now. God was like, if anyone doesn't observe the Sabbath, cut them off. Jesus himself said in Matthew 12, 11 through 12, he said to them, which one of you has a sheep, if it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will not take hold of it and lift it out? How much more valuable is a man than a sheep? So it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Jesus absolutely recognized the necessity of observing the Sabbath. But in a world full of sin, it can be complicated. If your sheep falls in a well on the Sabbath, it would be infinitely worse to let it scream for 20 hours and then get it on Monday because you didn't want to break a rule. If you're getting ready for church next Sunday and your kid falls and breaks his arm, bring him to the hospital. Don't bring him here so I didn't forget the assembly of the saints and then go to the hospital, and then they hate church because they had to sit here for 3 hours with a broken arm. Go to the hospital. And God understands the mess of this world. I just saw an article. There are missionaries in South Korea. They are speaking on the computer to North Korean prostitutes who are pregnant, because the North Korean Johns are going to abort the baby so they can keep working. So the South Korean pastors are purchasing these girls to smuggle them into the country so they can give birth to save the children's lives. They're paying smugglers to keep funding their operation of prostitutes. But that's better than watching the children die. Do you see what I'm saying? life is messy. And so for better, for worse, I'm not sitting here saying that Isaac and Rebecca, or Rebecca and Jacob aren't going to do anything wrong. It's bad to deceive your husband. It's bad to deceive your father. But they felt it was much worse to stand by and do nothing as he jeopardized the covenant. And so for better, for worse, they act. Now the second thing I want you to see is the heart of Rebecca. You see, this has always been explained that Isaac was just looking out for Esau, and they do the same thing with Rebekah, that she only cares about Jacob. That's not true. Any godly mother knows you even care about that difficult child. She cares about this difficult child, and as we read through this text, I want you to hear the provision she makes for Esau. Because, and once again, it's messy, but here is a godly woman put in a horrible position. So let's keep reading. Verse 9. Go now to the flock and bring me from there 2 choice kids of the goats. Do you hear it? And I will make savory food from them for your father, such as I love. Here's the first cue that Rebekah is doing what she's doing, not only for Jacob, but also for Esau. How many goats